Greetings, travelers of the galaxy and students of the Force, to today's video. The climactic duel of the Obi-Wan series saw Obi-Wan Kenobi again triumphing over Vader, but more importantly, over his own demons that seem to have been plaguing him for the entirety of the season, and most likely the previous 10 years. We get an idea that Obi-Wan is back to his old strength purely based on how the duel begins. Rather than hide and wait or attempt to ambush Vader, Obi-Wan meets him head on, and he assumes his iconic position before the battle commences. However, for anyone who is familiar with the way Obi-Wan fights will have noticed that there was a stark difference in the way that he was fighting this time around compared to his previous lightsaber duels. Well, this is what we will be breaking down today. But first, we are deciding to bring the best Star Wars lore directly to you as often as we can, so if you haven't already, please consider subscribing for daily posts on all your favorite Star Wars content, and make sure to leave a comment telling us what kind of subjects you would like to see explored. Now, without further ado, let's get into it, and why Obi-Wan changed his lightsaber technique and style to fight Vader, as well as explore which form he was likely using against Vader instead of his Form 3 Sarisu, the all-defensive form. To begin with, and on the topic of Sarisu, the pose that Obi-Wan has made famous during his career in the Clone Wars is actually a Sarisu stance, and this is what he opens with. Sarisu, or Form 3 of lightsaber combat, is the most defensive form of them all, and one that Obi-Wan had mastered to perfection. Mace Windu didn't just call Obi-Wan Kenobi a master of defense in Sarisu, but the master of defense. Sarisu follows a strict code of almost creating an impenetrable barrier of pure defense. It was originally intended to be a counter to blasting wielding opponents, but when in saber-to-saber combat, users of this form are able to last much longer than is common. What allows the practitioner of Sarisu to do so is conserve their energy while waiting for the perfect moment to find an opening in their opponent's defenses, and to take that moment and strike. Again stated by Master Windu, he said that Obi-Wan had taken the form to the highest degree possible, and was again the master of Sarisu. Sarisu was the form that Obi-Wan used for the entirety of the Clone Wars and against Vader in his final duel on Mustafar. However, he didn't always use this form, as earlier in his career, Kenobi used a different one. As a Jedi Padawan under Qui-Gon Jinn in The Phantom Menace, as well as in Attack of the Clones, Obi-Wan actually used Form 4, known as Ataru. The form was used by Master Qui-Gon Jinn as well as Yoda, noted for being exceptionally aggressive and using quick bursts of energy to overwhelm opponents. Ataru excellently employed acrobatic movements as well as unarmed strikes to end fights as quickly as possible. As Qui-Gon Jinn began to get older though, he wasn't able to employ as much of the acrobatic aspect as he used to when using Ataru, and so he changed his Ataru style to suit more of a heavy two-handed striking one. Heavy strikes followed by quick parries in order to make up for his lack of defenses and cover up for them. So why does all of this information matter? Well, it plays an exceptionally important role in absorbing the fight between Vader and Kenobi in the final episode of the season, as we believe that Obi-Wan lured Vader into a false sense of overconfidence, and then suddenly switched styles on him, catching him off guard. Let's break the duel down from the beginning though. As the two combatants square off on the rocky planet, they exchange only a few short words, Vader asking if Obi-Wan planned on killing him, to which Obi-Wan simply replied what exactly he said to him on Mustafar: "I will do what I must." From here, he takes the Sarisu stance, and Kenobi has already won the mind game. Vader has trained for years to perfect his style on utterly destroying Form 3 users, as his inability to get past Obi-Wan's defenses on Mustafar is what caused that fight to drag out as long as it did, until Obi-Wan was able to gain the high ground and lure Vader into a bad decision, a decision that cost him the remainder of his limbs. Upon taking the Sarisu stance and saying that line, Kenobi has put up a false front against Vader. Vader now assumes that Kenobi thinks that he can take Vader down just like he did the first time. However, Vader is having none of it and begins to attack Kenobi. It's also important to note that Darth Vader planned to fight against Sarisu wielders not solely because of Obi-Wan Kenobi, but because a lot of other Jedi, including the likes of Kanan and Jarrus, and Jedi that survived Order 66, also used Form 3. What this boils down to is Vader has been using the last decade to specifically break Sarisu. As the fight begins, Obi-Wan is again on the defensive for the first little bit of their duel, pretending to be the same Jedi he once was, and as we see, Vader is overwhelming his defenses, until suddenly, after the first time Vader throws Obi-Wan to the ground and he rolls to his feet, he immediately switches to Ataru and goes on the offensive. From here, Vader is completely thrown off guard and staggered. Having been used to fighting Obi-Wan's Sarisu during their entire training, he has never faced Qui-Gon's Ataru. Using heavy two-handed strikes, quick parries, combat rolls, and unarmed strikes, Obi-Wan gains the advantage in their duel, as well as created an opening where he could bash in Vader's chest plate and destroy his breathing apparatus, leaving Darth Vader effectively crippled. As soon as the plate was destroyed, Vader was little more than a sitting duck for Obi-Wan. This is our first indication that Obi-Wan is becoming like he was in A New Hope. This fight echoes the duel Ben had with Maul in Rebels. He did the exact same thing against Darth Maul, starting off in the Sarisu stance, but then switching to Qui-Gon's Ataru stance. In this case, Maul sees this, recognizes Qui-Gon Jinn's Ataru, and again attempts to do the same cheap move that killed Qui-Gon Jinn all those years ago on Naboo. But Obi-Wan was ready for it, and countered, killing Maul instantly. Just as Obi-Wan called Vader Darth, we are beginning to see the Alec Guinness wise monk-like master that we know from the original Star Wars trilogy. Obi-Wan has come full circle, and now he has embraced Qui-Gon Jinn fully. So, what more does it mean him using Qui-Gon Jinn's variation of Ataru? This should have tipped us off to Qui-Gon's presence and Qui-Gon Jinn being close to his former apprentice. Before the fight ever began, Obi-Wan spoke to his master, saying that he had to face Vader and needed to end it. Although Qui-Gon may not have spoken directly to Obi-Wan in this moment, his influence on Kenobi heavily impacted the duel itself, and directly afterwards, Qui-Gon's ghost came to Kenobi. Another interesting thing about this is that Obi-Wan essentially pulls off the trick against Vader that he has been using against Jedi for years now, lulling them into a false sense of security and then changing up the lightsaber form at a moment's notice. What's most impactful about this is Qui-Gon Jinn. It was Qui-Gon Jinn that in a sense saved Obi-Wan in this moment. Darth Vader was so utterly astonished that Obi-Wan would switch styles like that, as again, Obi-Wan is not a master of Sarisu, he is the master of Sarisu, so for the master of Sarisu to change up like this was quite the shock. A shock that ultimately cost Vader the duel. But anyway, my friends, what did you think of this? Did you pick up on the fact that Obi-Wan was far more aggressive in the duel than he normally is in his normal lightsaber technique? Did you realize that Obi-Wan was now using Ataru, but more specifically, Qui-Gon's Ataru? Let us know your thoughts on this down below. And as always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and we hope to see you in the next video.